So this is going to be a two-part series detailing how I made this cabinet. In this cabinet, I'm going to try and open it. I took the hardware off because I'm painting it. It is one of those cabinets that holds trash cans. So this is actually almost done. I just have to paint it. What's on there now is primer. It's not going to be white once it's finished. And this was one of those projects where the customer sent me a photo and pretty much asked me to match it exactly. So none of the design elements are really my own. Where my skill set came into play was re-engineering a design from a photo and building it for them. So that's basically what this video is going to entail. I consider this to be a pretty simple build. It's essentially just a cabinet with some hinged front doors to hold your trash. And like I said, I'm pretty sure this is only going to be a two-part series. So the beginning of this project is pretty much identical to just making a regular cabinet, and I'm going to start by cutting down my plywood to size. This plywood is birch veneer ply. It started out as a 4x8 sheet. I already cut it into smaller sections, but you can see I'm ripping it down to size on my table saw. And this cabinet, I believe, is about 36 inches tall. I can't remember the exact dimensions. About 18 inches deep. So those are the sizes I'm cutting right now, and then I'll clean them up with the radial arm saw instead of using the miter gauge. It's just a little bit easier to do with the radial arm saw, and the throat of it is pretty deep, so I could cut nice sized chunks of plywood on that. So then once I had those, I could cut the top and the bottom. The top is one solid piece just because I wanted it to be a little structural, because it is going to be holding trash cans. And because it's so skinny, by the time you cut 3-inch sections, which is what I usually do, it's a pretty skinny piece. And then I'm going to go through and cut a rabbet in the top for the top to fit in. So that's a 3/4 inch rabbet. I make those about 3/8 of an inch deep. And then I'm going to come up a little bit and cut a dado, and that will be the bottom shelf. The bottom shelf is really based off the fact that there's a decorative foot on this, also based on the opening for the trash cans. All the dimensions are based on the trash cans as well, and these are just black trash cans that I got from Lowe's, the cheap ones. And then on the back, I'm going to cut a rabbet for the backer. And those are the main cuts on my two side panels. So then these are all of the dimensions. If you want to cut something like this, this is basically what you need to make this. So it's 3/4 inch birch veneer ply. Those are the dimensions. I was wrong about the 36 inch. You can see how tall it is. There's a 3/4 inch rabbet on the back, a 3/4 inch dado on the bottom. So then once I had those, I already had the top and bottom ripped down, and then I could rip them to size based off of that dado and the width I need. So this is also going to have a center partition for strength. And this width is basically so that the two trash cans can fit in there nicely with a little bit of wiggle room. So then I could dry fit my panels, and once I dry fit my panels, I can measure for the center dado. So these top and bottom panels, you can see they're not as wide as the two edges because you want the backer to fit in there, so they only go as far back as the rabbet, not as far back as the entire cabinet. So I could kind of fit that into place. And then once I have those, I could put the trash cans in, make sure they tilt. That's the other thing. You're not making this as tall as a trash can. You're making this as tall as the trash can for when it's tilted, which adds a good 6 inches onto the can. And then I'm gonna, once I had that in place, I could measure center and then cut 2 dados on the top and bottom, and then measure for that and slide in my centerpiece. Now the centerpiece isn't as thick, but I didn't want to waste materials. It's about 3/4 inch too skinny, so I'll just add a poplar filler afterwards so that I wouldn't have to buy an extra sheet of plywood. And then I had some 1/4 inch birch veneer ply laying around, and this is what I'm using for the backer. I didn't have a piece big enough for the whole backer, so I just used 2 small pieces. And since this spans the entire width, it'll still be extremely strong using 2 separate pieces instead of 1. Then I can put this together. Since the sides are going to be seen, I'm not going to pre-drill any holes, but the top and bottom won't be seen. So I'm going to pre-drill some holes, countersink some screws into this while it dries, and also for strength. But for the sides, I'm going to have to use clamps. So just put a bunch of glue in there, and then I could slowly start assembling this. The nice thing, and I say this in all my videos, the nice thing about rabbits and dados are it won't come out perfectly square the first when you glue it together like this, but it is very close and it's easy to get it to be square. Not only are they stronger cabinets, but that's one of the reasons I do prefer dados and rabbits, is the assembly of them is very easy, how they fit together. So then I could put the backer in place. The backer also helps square up the panel. If the backer doesn't fit, it means your cabinet isn't square. So you can see I'm going to make a couple adjustments. I'm going to measure my diagonals and make a couple of adjustments. And then I'm also going to put a chalk line down the back, and that will tell me where that center partition is, and that's where I could put all of my screws. Now that looks really crooked now that I see the camera view here, but I can assure you that it's actually extremely square. Measure my diagonals, make sure the whole cabinet's square, and then when it is, I could secure that backer. So then I'm working off of a photo, and you can't really see the mechanism used for what the trash cans sit on, so I kind of designed something myself. So I'm cutting 2 3/4 inch panels that are going to sit into a dado that are the door fronts. So that's what these are. I'm cutting these oversized to start, and then I could trim them down later. So these are basically going to sit in the bottom of the cabinet. You can see there's the trash can. Those are going to sit, and that is what is going to lift the whole thing out. Just making sure that I still have clearance with that added thickness piece of ply there. So the bottom has a little bit of a decorative bottom. So I'm cutting that out now, and this is faced on the front of the cabinet. Like I said, I worked off a photo, so this isn't inset into the piece. So I cut, and then I put some edge banding on one edge, because you'll see that edge. And then I'm going to line it up. I'm going to mark and then cut that and edge band that as well. I'm cutting a little bit, I'm cutting pretty much on the inside of my pencil mark, because the edge banding will add about a 1/16 of an inch thickness to the piece. You can see I cut that down to size. I could add that little piece of edge banding so you don't see the plies. And then I could trim that down. And then I'll also edge band the top, because the top you'll see as well. You won't really see the bottom. So that fits nicely. So the hinges will be sunk, the bottom set of hinges will be sunk into this piece. So once it fits, I could edge band the top as well. I've edge banded the bottoms of stuff. You'll see the curve I put into this, and sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. With this, you won't really see it, so I didn't bother about it. So this is going to get 2 curves, so I'm cutting this up. I cut it in half, and then I cut it into that one segment on one side, one segment on the other side. I cut that into 2 skinnier quadrants on the edges and 2 thicker quadrants on the side, and then I drew a rough curve on a piece of paper based off the same measurements. With that rough curve, I could fold this in half, I could cut that out, and then it will be identical. It's an easy way to get curves and markings into pieces, with both sides being the same dimension if you're like me and you're not great at drawing. So that's basically what's going to get cut out on both sides, and then I'm just using a jigsaw to cut that out, and I could clean it up after the jigsaw cut. And then this is the part I didn't edge band, this bottom part, because the curve of this would have made it a little bit of a pain, and like I said, you won't really ever see this. And these were centered pretty much underneath where the doors are going to be for the piece. So that's the one, and then I'll make the exact same cut on the other side. And then this is what that is going to look like. Now this doesn't come up to the bottom shelf because since I'm putting a dado on the doors, and you'll see how I do this in the next video, I wanted there to be some thickness below the doors to hold that shelf in place, which is why that bottom footer is a little bit slower, a little bit shallower than coming to the shelf. So then there's also the same decorative element on the sides, but it's a little bit bigger. So all I did was I kind of took my original pattern and I moved it up, you could see, in 3 different increments in order to make that pattern identical yet a little bit bigger. I chose the one that looked the best on the panel, and then I cut that out as well. So it's the exact same design, it's just a little bit bigger. And there's the side panel, and I'm going to cut that out. You can see it in the photo, I cut it out same way with the jigsaw, and those are my pieces. So then this is that 3/4 inch poplar I was talking about. You could see how my center panel doesn't come fully to the front, but I could smooth that out with some poplar. And in hindsight, it would have been smart to do this after I edge banded that inner edge, because the poplar one, it doesn't have to be edge banded, but since I made it flush with the cabinet, I ended up having to edge band that center piece. Otherwise it would have been off by a little bit. So now before I start making the doors, that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm edge banding all those edges of the carcass. I have an edge banding iron, but an actual iron works just as well. So then once that was done, I'm going to finally glue the bottom in place. I don't want any hardware in the front, so I'm adding a liberal amount of glue to the front, and then I'm going to clamp it in place. And I don't think I showed it in the video, but you could see I added a cleat on the bottom. So that cleat is screwed in from the bottom of the cabinet, and then I could go through and then screw from the back side of the cleat into the front side of that molding on the bottom, and it will be super secure without having to worry about any hardware. So the top of this is actually old barnwood, and I have this on hand, and I had some planed already, so this was really easy. I just took 2 pieces, I cut them down to rough size, and then glued them all together into a panel tabletop. If I didn't have this, I would have had to plane this down, joint it, and all of that, but I already had the pieces, which was nice. So the next I could come in and remove the glue. A paint scraper is the best way I have found to remove this glue run out that's on there. If you're super diligent, you could clean it up before it dries, but usually I'm doing this at the end of the day, so I just put it aside and clean it up the next day. This paint scraper makes quick work of it, and the top is supposed to look kind of rustic, so that is always a bonus. You don't have to get super crazy cleaning it up. So once most of the glue's off, I'll go through and belt sand this, because there's always little undulations in the top, make everything nice and flush. And then I could trim the top panel down to size. It has about an inch overhang on both sides as well as the front. So to attach it, I elongated some 1/4 inch holes in the cabinet top. And then I'm just going to screw it in from the bottom. Those elongated holes will allow for seasonal movement of the wood. The wood will be able to move in those elongated holes. So I just put a washer and a drywall screw to attach the whole thing. And that is what that looks like.